We're live, Thembelihle, if you want to introduce Randall.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, I think Thembelihle is having a little bit of technical issues there. But we have Randall Mabawa with us, who is the Regional Communications Officer for East at Blue Ventures Conservation, with a focus on helping youth understand the usefulness of community-led conservation, the blue economy, and its associated successes and challenges. Randall, over to you, and you may begin your presentation. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Marisa. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon to all of you, and good morning and good evening to those in different time zones. My name is Randall Mabwa. I'm a science communicator, and I work at Blue Ventures as a regional communications officer for East Africa and also part of the global comms. My background is in marine biology and fisheries. Now, enough about me. We'll just take us right. So, like I said, Blue Ventures is we are a global marine NGO, and we focus on fisheries research and conservation. And we were founded 18 years ago with our first community initiative in Andavodoka in southwest Madagascar. And we develop locally led approaches to marine and coastal conservation. And we put communities first, basically, to ensure that both people and nature benefit. And what's vital to that is that we strive to take action so that we can drive inclusivity to empower fisher communities to sustainably use and conserve ecosystems that they depend upon, for their daily lives, while also advancing their rights. And in a nutshell, we work in areas where the ocean is essential to the survival of communities, indigenous peoples, and economies. Now, when we speak about locally led marine conservation, we focus on strengthening 6 core areas. And some of these 6 core areas that have been listed on our screens, we're basically putting communities first, and that is what underpins all the work that we do, because we believe in engaging all the communities. And to do that, we've focused mainly on global areas where biodiversity is high, Belize in the Americas, the UK, India, Thailand, the Coral Triangle, and in the Y region, countries of Kenya, Tanzania, Mozambique, Comoros, through direct interventions and through partners in Madagascar as well. Now, some of the work that we do, like I mentioned earlier, we do through, I'm just trying to, we do through partners. Sorry. And those are some of the partners that we work with. Now, I'll tell you a story about communities and conservation in Africa and how we can create a win-win situation for both people and nature. So basically, historically in Africa, conservation was not appreciated by communities. And because that meant that their land was taken away, access to their daily bread was limited or stopped in totality. It was hard enough because of the imposition of rules and many infringements and many of the approaches infringing on their human rights. And to an extent, that is still the case. Now, enter climate change, and we have warming seas, degrading coral reefs, dwindling mangrove forests that are, and these critical ecosystems continue to be threatened. And what that means is that our livelihoods, indigenous people's livelihoods and communities' survival are also threatened. Now, communities and indigenous people aside, our search for food and money, our very existence has led to overfishing at an all-time high. And it's not only, and it's not because of artisanal fishers whose fishing is selective mostly. Infringement on human rights is set to become the norm if we do not wholly embrace locally led marine approaches. Now, there have been major calls to conserve through restricted access in order to preserve biodiversity, giving it a chance to adapt to a changing climate. And that is what the science tells us. And it's true. But then behind our screen as scientists, as we crunch the numbers, as we work on the data, we sometimes overlook these indigenous communities whose wish is only to get food to eat, and whatever left and whatever supplies they actually get is sold for some few coins. But then what happens if we restrict access fully? And this is where you go to the 30 by 30. Now, the beauty of this is that from past lessons, from conservation approaches, we've realized that some approaches need to change for people and nature to benefit. So how are we going to do it to ensure that communities embrace locally marine managed areas and conservation wholly? Yeah. And how we do it is by ensuring that communities embrace, communities are put first, that we ensure that human rights are preserved so that both people and nature can benefit. And through the locally led approaches, we avail knowledge and in this instance, even make youth and communities aware. Because if you provide someone with the knowledge and they understand it, then they're able to believe in that initiative. Now, that having been said, we would also be, we would be focusing on building relations and reducing conflicts. If you place the responsibility of managing resources of fisheries on communities and working with them and local authorities through a holistic approach, through a bottom-up approach, and that is participatory as well, then it leads us to reduce conflicts. And this further builds ownership and responsibility of the environment that we have. Now, when it comes to the youth, we are looking at pushing the digital age so that there's no digital divide. That way, it's easier to share key learnings with people in different places. And as we go about pushing the key learnings, we achieve success through collaboration. Now, if we partner with everybody, if we offer everybody a seat at the table through a participatory approach, we make sure everybody takes place in the management, in policy, in a system where everybody is empowered to efficiently manage, to efficiently understand what kind of policies are going to impact their lives, and that will ensure that there is equitable distribution of both burdens and rights, and also that learning is transferable. And the fourth bit of it is that we make it sustainable by ensuring that we can be able to push knowledge against a divide, that most of the youth are currently facing. Now, how do we make this sustainable? Yeah, by ensuring that that everybody gets to participate, and through openness and humility, that we get to listen to all those people who should be part of the initiative, by not looking down upon the people we think don't have knowledge, yet they do have knowledge. So when we embrace indigenous knowledge, that's what we do. And the second thing is that when we provide evidence through learning, we showcase to communities how they can adapt. We are able to teach communities and to show them how they can use data, how they can understand data, and how they can use the same data to actually manage their resources. And another thing is actually through when you put communities first, like I've previously mentioned, basically understanding that these communities also have knowledge, they understand their systems, they've been there since time immemorial. So we actually need to embrace what they bring to the table. Now, through innovation and through collaboration, we have a chance for us to actually come together to the table and actually work fully to conserve our systems. Now, by working to achieve models that benefit both people and nature through locally marine managed areas, we're able to engage communities innovatively. we're able to make marine management make economic sense to communities, because when you go down to communities, most of the times, and sometimes it's all about survival. Now we know that everybody seeks to survive. And if these models, if the 30 by 30 model and the frameworks that underpin it are put in the way that people will see the sense that they're going to survive from it, and at the same time nature will actually benefit, then there's a bigger chance of us increasing efforts at a localized scale to actually preserve biodiversity, and at the same time people are going to benefit from it. Now, I'm sure this has become starting to sound like a broken record, but I can't overemphasize how much we need to put communities first, because it's something that has been overlooked. And from the hardline stance of historical conservation, recognition of the rights of communities and indigenous people has not been done. So if we take time to do that as scientists, as policymakers, as people who sit on the table, then we're able to recognize communities and indigenous peoples as the stewards of nature, knowing that they have been managing these natural resources and these systems since time immemorial. Now, if you provide them with the rights to vote when it's time to vote, provide them with the opportunity and the platform to engage and put their voice forward, then we stand a greater chance of achieving success. Now, some of the approaches that we can actually use is through a health and environment approach, by targeting things like maternal and sexual health issues, which continue to affect us. They affect women and girls who suffer the most. They affect the youth who are also affected by things like social injustices. There's a lot of hopelessness. There's a lot of mistrust for political and social justice system. So what do? Basically empower girls to stay in school longer, for them to learn, for them to have a clear shot at leadership and stewardship. And as we all know, a society is basically as good as how its women are empowered, and that's a fact. When you look at those societies where women are empowered, things are different than in societies where women are oppressed. So that's a narrative that needs to change. And as for the youth, we need to act collectively. We need to challenge ourselves through ideas. We do not have to wait until a time where you think you have enough power for you to make a change. You can start small. And this has been, said by the speakers who came earlier on. And it's through ideas, by challenging ourselves to become global shapers, starting with localized efforts, that we are going to bring change. And, it starts small and building it bigger. Now, as we do that, we make sure that through a biodiversity standpoint, by focusing now on nature, we acknowledge that communities and indigenous people's knowledge can be useful and has always been useful to conservation. As we focus on conserving critical ecosystems through protected areas, through good design where there's zonation, we also aim to cover other biodiversity spots through other effective conservation measures, basically by laying bare the knowledge to our people to understand the importance of basically just taking care of everything that they have. And as we do that, we proceed to an extent that you need to tell people that there's hope. And do you think there's hope as a youth? Of course, there is hope, yes, because as we continue to apply a multi-pronged approach, approaching conservation from different sectors, getting a lot of stakeholders on board, we continue to ramp up efforts in marine and fisheries conservation. And it's important that we let communities take charge. Again, I can't reiterate this enough, because they've always been stewards of nature. Now, just because we refer to fisher communities as small-scale fishers does not mean they're small in that effect. And because they collectively provide for all of us. Now, other than just making sure that there's hope, as we call for conservation efforts to be ramped up, as we call for 30% of the world's oceans to be conserved by 2030, It should be our goal as a youth and leaders, as scientists, as policymakers, to call for the 30 by 30 framework to be an all-inclusive framework, for it to recognize the rights of communities and indigenous peoples. And as for the youth, just, it's simply put that we have what it takes for us to bring change to our communities in the smallest way possible, by starting small and not giving up, to make sure that our voices are heard, by challenging each other and becoming global shapers. And it's with this kind of inclusivity that we'll make a good and sustainable progress to conserve biodiversity, if we set key frameworks to benefit both man and nature. Thank you. And I'll take questions, if any.
Thank you so much for that insightful talk, Randall. What has really stuck with me is saying that starting small and not giving up. I think a lot of the time we sometimes feel that we need to have it all figured out before we can actually make change. And I think the other thing you said is hope. Sometimes it's difficult to stay hopeful in the space of conservation, and especially when working with communities and youth. So my question to you, since there aren't, I do see one in the chat, but I'll go ahead.
Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to do the questions now, because we're going to ask that all the questions move into the main discussion session. Unfortunately, we're running a little bit tight on time, and we need to get Randall out of this one and into the next one. Sorry, Marissa. I didn't mean to interrupt you there.
I'll take questions in the next session.
Thanks, Randall. Sure. Thank you.
All right.
Super.
Thanks.
So thanks, everyone. We'll see you in the discussion session immediately after this.